Okay, we're going to start because Vitaly has 221 slides. He just added 3, so it's 224, which means that it's about 5 slides a minute. Okay, so it's going to be tough for him to do, tough for you to watch. So we'll get started. There are people who really, really crave attention, right? I'm one of them, but this gentleman here is a total different level of wanting attention.
You're always so kind, Vanilvo.
He's giving 2 talks, which is generous because one of our speakers fell out. So we're very glad to have him here. And so you have enough time. Without further ado, Vitaly Friedman.
Thank you, Soon. It's so good to have so many of you here. It's really unbelievable. It's very cool. I actually really love coming back to Zurich, and it's my 5th year. So it's like I'm trying to set the record here, so it's really great. Now, well, I have to admit one thing. This talk isn't finished. It's like a few thoughts, ideas, things I noticed over the last few months. So I've been doing a few projects on e-commerce over the last, well, since the beginning of this year, like working with Zalando and Otto and companies like that. And it's very interesting to see lots of things happening on large scale. When you can really make a little change, be it shipping costs or whatever, things like that, you can always end up seeing lots of really huge results. So I kind of really looked into it deep, and I spent 2-3 months really researching hard on all kinds of studies, articles, and so on and so forth, trying to figure out what would be a really nice way to design a checkout. Be it a very complex checkout like Virgin Airlines or any kind of this kind of buying tickets experience, or actually an e-commerce store like some of you might be working on, right? So this talk is kind of a summation of all the things I discovered, more or less. Now this is me. This is how I used to look like back in the day. Things changed over time. I'm still running Smash Magazine, but also at the same time I do a lot of consulting these days, and I love doing consulting in Zurich. Just saying. Right? But this talk is obviously not about me. Now, whenever the title of the talk is Smart E-commerce Design Patterns, right? Whenever we talk about design patterns, it kind of has this bad connotation. We tend to think about design patterns as, lazy solutions maybe, or off-the-shelf solutions. Just take something and you apply it to your project and voila, it works, right? So this is not quite what I mean. And I think that design patterns are really valuable, and this is the reason for this. As Mark Bolton said once, the design process is weird and complicated because it involves people and organizations which often are weird and complicated. Whenever I talk to companies and to managers in companies, they have a very clear understanding of how creative process looks like, right? This is creative process. You start somewhere and you follow a set of iterations and you improve and improve and improve and improve and improve, and at some point you are done, right? It doesn't work for me like this at all, because whenever we work, it feels more like this all the time. When you start exploring and you kind of diverge, and then you're trying to converge again, right? And then at some point you start with an idea and you hit a dead end, right? And in order to recover from a dead end, it's really helpful to be able to rely on those design patterns, right? Because otherwise you just lose time, because you have to rethink, you have to do something entirely different. So for me, like collecting these design patterns is a way to figure out how to get recovered from those dead ends. Now, I spend a lot of time on web forms, right? And obviously, when it comes to web forms, this is how I feel about forms, right? Because nobody likes filling them in. It's very tiring, annoying, boring, and just not fun, right? And there are some good reasons for this. Now, how many of you are familiar with this? This is a toolbox which was introduced by IBM in the 1950s in order to maintain, type in data, and fix computers or machines at the time, right? Now, obviously, things have changed, right? But, well, maybe not necessarily that much, because I'm traveling a lot, right? And whenever I'm traveling, I always get these weird emails from clients who want me to sign off something and scan and send to them by email or sometimes fax. Anybody still using fax? That's crazy, right? And I don't have a portable scanner with me. I don't have a portable printer with me. So whatever I do, well, screen grab, add signature, digital signature, rotate slightly, add noise with Photoshop action, send by email, right? It works like charm, but it's kind of one of the examples of how we still have these old, archaic principles really deeply engraved in humans' minds. It's just freaking unbelievable. This is one of the forms I hate most, right? I used to be a citizen of Republic of Belarus, and as a citizen of Republic of Belarus, I have other passport. If I want to apply to a visa to the UK, thank you very much, I'm other passport. But I have to enter all characters exactly as they appear on your ID, including letters, numbers, and symbols. Why I need to type in the symbols in here is, I don't know, it's just weird, but I have to. This is just wrong, right? This is my favorite example, so I always bring it up. Ryanair is a king of forms. Now, they did a responsive redesign. It still sucks, sorry. So, example, exhibit A. I looked up fare yesterday, total of 123 pounds. Returned today, and fare is 237 pounds. Flushed cookies, fare back to 123 pounds, right? Now, this is probably the most useful thing to learn from today, from my talk. But so always, there are a few things actually. You always have to, clear cookies, or use incognito mode, or pretend that your IP is from Poland. Because if you're from Switzerland, you are going to get higher prices automatically. So just keep that in mind. Like, this is unbelievable. This is a value for you right here. It's unbelievable. Another thing that kind of brings us to forms is, of course, a country selector at Ryanair. Now, if you want to book a flight at Ryanair, insurance is kind of added in whether you want it or not, unless you opt out. But to opt out, you need to conveniently find it between Denmark and Finland in your country selector. This is just mad and evil. This is not cool at all, right? But most forms are just boring. Just dead boring. You have to, retype your email address, retype your password. I'm wondering why you don't have to retype your first name and last name, but it's like you always have to do this stuff. But think about it for a second, right? If you look at the interface like this, kind of feels like work, right? It's a bit boring. I mean, it's a couple of input fields, select menu and, button. It feels like work. Well, we could do it a bit differently, right? And it doesn't feel like work at all anymore, right? You need to still, pick up your car or whatever, or you need to order a cab to come to you. But this doesn't feel like much work, well, this does for sure. So maybe we should be coming away from actually designing forms towards actually designing experiences that try to get rid of all the input fields, all the select drop-downs, and all the radio buttons as much as we can. Because sometimes we actually can do that, right? And this Uber interface is relatively simple, I would say, right? You have a slider and you have a button. That's pretty much it, right? It's still kind of a web form interface, but very differently. Now, I must admit, they do complicate things a little bit at times. You don't need that many options, I guess, unless you are in LA, because everything is supposed to be super extreme and over the top in the US, right? I kind of like this, right? It's also quite interesting here. You can actually hire a rickshaw, right, in India. That's pretty cool. I mean, and in Istanbul, you can actually rent a boat because it's faster. That's pretty cool, right? But this is not like a web form interface, right? And this is the same story. So here we've got a few input fields, feels like work. This feels more like an actual interface. So if you want to change something or type in something, kind of change smart defaults, right? You can just tap and change. Doesn't feel like work anymore. In fact, Typeform is trying to reinvent the form, where the idea is really interesting. What if we look at the form and focus on what people have to do, well, the only thing they have to do, absolutely have to do, which is, typing in the data. So what if they focused on the input field or whatever they have to type in all the time? They focus on one input field at a time. They just type. In order to move to the next field, you just press enter. If you want to select something, you don't use a mouse to select. You just type A, B, C, or D, right? If you want to say yes, you type Y. If you want to say no, you type N, right? And then you can also use this interface controls over here to move to the previous field and the next input field. Now, you might think, well, all right, but we can probably use it in a survey or in a quiz, and this is probably what they're using it for. But the Virgin Airlines interface is not much different from this, because you have really big, fat input, right, where you just tap. And whenever, it's kind of a long video. So, I mean, you would say, oh, this is a bit too much, this is a bit too big, and so on and so forth. But this is actually pretty much the same idea, just applied to this complex interface, right? You just tap. Here, you just tap. And then you kind of move through the interface one step at a time. You don't need to see like 50 input fields at the same time, right? And you know, as you can imagine, this flying kind of buying tickets experience is relatively difficult. It involves a lot of steps. So here, if you just kind of bring it down, bring this complexity down to just one input field at a time, this might work just well. Unfortunately, most interfaces are not like that. This is very difficult and very tiring to type in, really, really hard. And we can use, you know, simple techniques like using smart inputs. So if we have just two options, we can just use switch. You tap and you switch between the two options, right? If you have a price, minimum price and maximum price, you can also use a slider for this. It's kind of more convenient because you just, you know, tap and move. Also, if you have very specific kind of discrete number of options, you can just use segmented controls. Just let users tap, right? Because tapping is easier than typing. And also stepper is really important. For example, in the checkout, right? When you want to increase the number of items you want to buy, just tapping instead of actually typing. Kind of can go a long way. And you know, things like this. Sometimes you don't need the second, you never actually need, almost never need a second address line. And if you need it, well, you can tap and then you will actually have it showed up. You don't have to display it by default, especially if it's optional, right? If you have something, if you're requiring a specific, very sensitive data, like a phone number or even email, just explain why you need it, right? It might make sense to include something like an information button, which just, you know, explains why we need this information from you. Sliders don't have to be boring. They can also provide some metadata. So you can have something like a graph of most popular values or most popular ranges of values displayed in the background as Airbnb does, right? So you can still slide, but you will not expect any results between $9 and $25, for example, right? At the same time, you will not expect many results between 900 and 1,000 or whatever, right? Kind of makes sense. It's a subtle hint that really can go a long way. Obviously, email addresses are important. I told you we have lots of slides to go through. Email addresses are important. So we can actually provide some hints, auto-suggest, right, for emails. We can look in our data of what are the most popular email addresses that our customers have so they can log in easier just because we can, you know, provide some auto-suggest or correct them when they sign up. Another thing is, of course, we tend to ask for email and then we ask for email again to verify that people submitted the correct email in many e-commerce sites. Well, as we will find out soon, what do most people do when they encounter type email and retype email? Of course, copy-paste, right? So why do we do this? I mean, seriously, there is no point. But if email is really, really important, maybe it's actually better to ask for whether the email is correct in the very last step before the message is being sent. For example, if you're having a digital agency, design agency, you really need to make sure that the email address is correct because otherwise you will not be able to reach that customer, right? So why don't you just ask them to verify in the last step before they click on the submit button that the email is correct? Kind of makes sense. We have lots of patterns like this, right? So these are just basic web form stuff. I was actually hoping to go a bit faster for this. So this floating label pattern is probably familiar to most of you. How many of you have seen this before? Right? The problem is when you just have an input placeholder and you tap on it, well, the context is gone. But this way you kind of keep both the context of what people are typing and the actual input, which is pretty great. And you can actually even make it responsive, right? When you can say, well, if I don't have enough space to show the label, I'm going to show it on the right, on the top, right? But it's always present. So you can really play around with it a lot, right? And there are many things like this, which you can actually really make use of really easily. It's really not a big deal. However, most interfaces are really not like that at all, right? They're really boring, and they do not make use of many things that we actually can use today. Now, when it comes to checkout, actually, we think that this is not a particularly difficult process, but if you look at all the touch points, this is really hard. Like seriously, this is a really, really difficult task. If you just want to buy something, well, you have a lot of steps to go through. You have to add an item to the cart, you have to update the cart potentially, check shipping options, check tax costs, check delivery times, check the refund policy, check the best price guarantee, coupon codes, payment options, maybe review technical concerns if you don't know if it works or not, type in email and of course retype it or copy paste it just because everybody does it anyway. type in shipping address, cite the country selector because it's so huge and you have to scroll all the way and you have to figure out whether if you are from Netherlands, if it's the Netherlands, Holland, or maybe it's prioritized at the top 5, so it's not going to be showed up at the bottom end at all, like this kind of stuff. Also, you might have to review order, edit input, and so on and so forth. Like really, really difficult. And you thought it's all? Because it's not. At some point, you might run up into authorization failures. Try other payment methods, abandon shopping cart, return back later, try to purchase again, get delighted about the success page. At some point, you need the invoice, so you have to log in, but you forgot your login credentials, so you have to recover your password, and you log in, and you download your invoice, and you cross fingers and hope for the best. It's actually going to work. This is a lot of work for the user because many things can go wrong. No wonder then that the average abandonment rate is 68.353% in most e-commerce sites. That's a lot. It's like leaving 70% of the money on the table, right? This is a big deal, really a big deal. So if you look into the reasons why we have such a high abandonment rate, these are the main reasons. We have extra costs being a main reason. If you suddenly, all of a sudden in the checkout, start asking for a bit more money than you actually wanted to get in the beginning, people start getting confused or just annoyed. If you ask people to create an account, this is not a good thing, right? Because people prefer guest checkout. Also, credit card trust. They need to be able to have this sense of trust to your company, but also to the actual communication between their browser and the server. The complicated checkout process is not such a big deal, actually. So if you have some major usability issues, but everything else is fine, you will still be okay, right? Because it's just 18%. And payment methods, if credit cards are not supported or something, it's just 7%. So this is the biggest chunk, just because people don't trust the brand anymore. So let's look into them in a bit more detail. Now, obviously, hidden costs can have different forms. Now, we can talk about obvious things like shipping and tax and fees, but also data, right? Sometimes people just don't know what is going to happen with the data or why you need a telephone input, for example, from you, right? So this kind of costs are meant here. Now, it's very surprising to see that many checkouts really seem to not care. So here you see order subtotal in Walmart, which is 69, but you need to go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps in order to get to the actual full amount of money you have to pay. So you have to type in all the data, including your credit card data, right, and the shipping and everything, before you know the actual price. Now, this really frightens people. They don't like that, right? So what would be an option? Well, we could just say show an estimate shipping costs, right, based on the IP that we detected, right? And estimate taxes as well, just to provide some general sense of what it's going to be like on average. Because 69.99 and 84.14 is a big difference. And you don't want to just shock people at the end of the checkout by asking for $20 more. That's kind of a big deal. Although it's really like a big deal, actually, if you think about it. But, you kind of get the idea, I guess. So we should always display full estimate price early on. For example, in the cart, when people add an item to the cart, way before they enter credit card data. But not only the actual cost, but the full granularity. Steven, can you pronounce this word for me? Thank you very much. Granularity, right? And cost descriptions. So people know exactly what they're paying for. Now, there are good examples for this. So Lumi is a really nice checkout. And they also have these nice buttons, which I kind of like. And they also provide delivery options. But they have different options, like first class package, express worldwide, and so on and so forth. But I still don't know how much time it will take to get a specific package, right? So showing a price is okay, but you also need to be really precise about the amount of time I will actually have to wait in order to get it, right? What could you do except that? Well, you can actually just say, well, if you want to ship to the US, Canada, or Japan, why don't you just tell us where you want the products to be shipped to, right? So when you start adding an item to the cart, you can pop up a little light box just asking this stuff. And you can also ask people to select their preferred currency, right? Because this really adds on to transparency. It helps avoid confusion, simplifies comparing. But of course, if your user has an account, you should value their preferences instead of the IP. Because, for example, I'm traveling a lot, right? So even if I'm in Zurich right now, it doesn't mean I want to, have things shipped to Switzerland. So that's important too. Because if you actually get a price in a weird currency you don't know, it really doesn't tell me how much I'm going to pay, right? So it's like a big deal. And this is very simple, actually. Whenever you have a shopping cart, you can just say, well, this shop is obviously from the UK, so if it's £330, I'm going to pay around $560 or 464 euros. Just conversion on spot, right? Really easy. But again, both time and price are very important. So here, both on Amazon and Toys R Us and Walmart, you kind of get when you're supposed to get this item, right? So standard is going to be arrive on Wednesday, expedited on Tuesday, and so on and so forth, but you don't see the price. You don't know how much more you're going to pay for this extra service. So it is important to combine both. I mean, it's not the most beautiful interface ever, but if you combine both, saying that 3 business days and the price that you have to pay extra, this is just damn clear, right? So users cannot make an informed decision if either speed or cost is missing from the shipping options. So you have to provide 2 and be really specific about it. And it's also a good idea to show stock availability, just to make sure that people know that this stuff is in stock and they don't have to wait more than they're supposed to wait, right? Again, very simple. You just add a status in your shopping, in your add to cart, but in your cart or in the checkout, right? Just to make sure that people know how much they have to wait. Another interesting thing is what happens with ratings, and more specifically, what happens with pricing and ratings together. So very often you end up like searching for something very specific. Maybe it's a TV, but maybe it's something that you can just buy in portions, right? So sometimes it's very difficult to compare because they are presented in different packages, in different sizes, in different volumes. So think about unit pricing as well, because you can actually provide not only total price, but also price per unit, right? And also let users sort by lowest price per unit, because it can go a long way, right? So for example, here, I don't know if you can see it, but Amazon says, well, these packages have different prices, right? But it says 0.29 per ounce, 0.55 per ounce, and so on and so forth. It just really, again, helps to gain transparency. Ratings are really important and really interesting too. If you look at most popular products, you will always discover this pattern, right? Where you have lots of people really liking the product, quite a good number of people really disliking the product, and a few people in between, right? So you always discover this. It doesn't matter if it's e-commerce, like electronics, or if it's books, right? It's always the same pattern. So these items with this pattern are the most valuable ones. These are the ones that people trust and want to buy. So if you can prioritize them instead of the other ones, even if you have a few products that have only 5-star ratings, but only 5 of them then, right? People will not really trust them. It's a really good idea to always have a few 1 stars, just a few, and many 5 stars, right? This is more important than just 5 stars. Now, this is not a joke, because this is really important at this point. For people, it really doesn't matter. If you have 12 ratings or 2, they will prefer 12 ratings, although the 2 ratings are better on average, right? It doesn't matter if you have 57 or 4, they will still prefer the first one, although it's lower rating, right? And if you have 57 4.5 stars and 5 stars, they will still prefer the first one, although it has lower average, right? So it's like a really big deal. So you better make sure that you have some bad ratings as well, because otherwise people will not trust the judgment, right? So, for example, here on Home Depot, they have exactly this sorting logic. They don't just sort by the average, right? So if you have obviously 5 reviews and all of them 5 stars, you would get 5.0 in average. But they're not ranked as high as the other ones, although they have lower ranking. So you could keep that in mind as well. So users don't trust averages based on less than 5 ratings. So they prioritize more ratings despite lower average. So provide better results, we can seek appropriate rating patterns, prioritize them, exactly looking at this pattern, right? And encourage people, of course, to submit more ratings and potentially even bad ratings, because they are important too. But even ratings themselves are not really descriptive at times. If you really want to improve your checkout and you want to improve your e-commerce experience in general, it's a good idea to be really specific about what people liked and what people really disliked, right? So if you can do this as Flipkart does, it gives people a really good idea about how good or how bad a product is, right? Because this is really helpful. The same like thing that TripAdvisor does, right? Where it's not just 4.6 stars for a hotel, right? They really break it down to all the little details. Service, value, cleanliness, and so on and so forth. The same goes, for products that you're selling, battery life, performance, camera, and so on. And it's perfectly fine to actually let users, downvote specific features, because people are expecting that. They expect that something isn't, great in every product. Unless they have a lot of money, they will buy everything that's great, right? But this is not reality. So what you could do in your interface then is kind of provide something like a little tab maybe, right? Where you can allow users to select products based on those settings. Maybe battery life is the most important thing and not the display, right? Or maybe the other way around, or maybe heating is important, things like that. And you can even introduce some kind of this, explorer phase, where you go and say, I need a smartphone. What is important to me? Long battery life, this, and these are the options for you, right? It's a really better user experience. For example, AO does it, and they go a long way with it, really. So they really make an effort so that every single rating that people provide can contain some sort of, this ranking specifically for the features that this device, for example, has. And they also have comparison tables, which are really easy to do, and things like that. So it's a really nice example for this, right? And sometimes even Q&A, right? If people want to ask a question, so is it really, does this device really have a heating problem? Then people who actually bought it in the past can submit their feedback and say maybe yes, but there is a workaround for this, right? Another interesting thing, people are really crazy creatures. I mean, seriously weird. Well, all of you are weird, including myself as well. I just, annoyed most of the audience. That's very cool. It was a really bad joke. I'm sorry I never tested it. That's okay. But we kind of like coupon codes, but we don't like to see coupon codes, fields, input fields. That's very interesting. Apparently, 50% of users feel that they are overpaying when they see a coupon field but don't have a coupon themselves. So it's not a good idea to show a coupon field aggressively. Because what do people do? They go on Google and start searching for a coupon code. And if they don't find one, they get really annoyed and they abandon the shopping cart, right? So don't show it like, here is a big input field to type in your coupon code, coupon option. Instead, it's a better idea to have something like a button that, if people are looking for it, they will find it. But if they don't look for it, they will not find it. So you actually tap on it, and then you have a coupon code input field kind of being displayed. This is also the default behavior that Shopify has introduced recently, and it's really, really much better, right? So hide a coupon code option behind the link that reveals the form fields when clicked, okay? So this is just a bit of stuff about hidden cost. If you cover all of those bases, you will increase your conversion like that enormously, really, because this is the most important thing that you have to do, right? Another thing is obviously the forced account creation, which people really don't like. Especially, you have to create a new account before you're actually getting into, adding your data. And actually clicking this button is what annoys people most. This is the most annoying part. If you just had a few input fields asking for the name and creating an account on the fly, that's okay, but this is really annoying. Like clicking on create an account is really annoying, right? So this is the most hostile step, and 30%, according to research, leave due to forced account creation alone. 30% leave if you ask them to create an account, no matter what. And there are many reasons for this. Obviously, annoying, too much overhead, a new set of passwords, whatever. People also have privacy and spam concerns, but I like this one most. I don't have to do this if I walk into a store. Nobody is asking for my personal data or for my phone number. Well, sometimes maybe, but hopefully not, right? So this is like a really big deal. So guest checkout is necessary and should always be a default. So you should always be offering guest checkout as well. And make it really prominent. So this is a very boring checkout, but they do everything right? So there is just everything you need is right there. So, and the best part, the registration is not obligated. Proceed. This is really nice and kind. It's just one button and you move on to the next one, right? And if you want to absolutely have to create an account, they kind of do it anyway, So you type in the data anyway, and then in the end, you can decide if you still want to save this data to access it later, right? Which is nicer. It's just a bit nicer. So email, we talked about that already. That's very interesting. This is so annoying. We have to verify email all the time, and people really do go a long way to copy and paste, especially on mobile. That's really, really annoying. So 60% of users consistently copy-paste their email when asked to verify it in the checkout. Consistently, meaning like this is like, yes, I'm going to do this no matter what, right? So why don't we just remove the email verification altogether and use inline autocomplete, right? Just to make sure that the email is correct. We can't verify if this email exists, of course. But we can also ask people to review the email afterwards when they're almost finished with the data input. Kind of can go a long way as well. Now, another interesting thing, this is so annoying because it's everywhere. Shipping address, billing address. Shipping address and billing address are almost identical all the time, really all the time. But very often you have to really opt in to say that, yes, please do use the same data for my shipping address as you do for my billing address. So this is really not necessary, especially because you have to type in a lot of data. Like this block is a lot of data to fill in. That's really, really annoying. Apple isn't much better. You can copy shipping address, but they copy it wrong in wrong input field, so you have to fix it. This is so bad. This is really, really annoying. So most users order products to the same address, so hide the billing address option by default. And if they do need to change the email, the address for the billing, just have a little radio button or check box to allow them to do that. Now this is a very nice checkout as well. So there are actually many things that you can notice here, but the best part is the actual total user experience. So, So they do have only free options or free products to sell. However, everything is also in the right place, including, of course, the shipping and the billing address. So what we have here is a responsive e-commerce site, right? Responsive checkout, where you have free options of free products to show. This overview, which is obviously a light box, becomes a slider in a small view. So you can really navigate to the left and to the right, and you can select the item right here. It's very nice. This button to the next step is always at the bottom. So even if you have a really tall device, a small device, it's always in reach, because you know we have these taller devices, and it's really becoming really, really difficult to hit the hamburger icon in the left upper corner or right upper corner with a thumb, right? So what do people do? They use this movement. They have a device. They use this movement, using the second hand, right? But this is really annoying, which is why these controls should always be at the bottom. Like things like add to cart or checkout, things like that, should always be in reach. Not at the top, but at the bottom. And you know, obviously we can use autocomplete and things like that. This is not a big deal. But this is also very interesting because they also have forgiving input. So even if they couldn't find your address in the database or whatever, they still let you proceed because they trust you that you know what you're doing. Kind of a good thing, kind of a good feeling, if you ask me, right? So in this case, you have the next button always available, and you always have the card always available as well as a lightbox. And billing address is the same as shipping address by default. So if you're really looking for an example of a really good and simple e-commerce site with a simple checkout, this is a really, really good example. Please don't steal my data. It's fake anyway. That's okay, right? So this is a really nice experience, and I really like this as well. It's just everything is right. Here's everything is right. Now this is a very interesting one. People want to trust, but they find it very difficult to trust. So if you look at all of those seals, yeah. So we have lots of those seals everywhere. Okay, who said that this is the most trustworthy one? You're very special, Stephen. Because this one is the most trustworthy one. This one, the most trustworthy one. This one. Okay, this is just whatever, I don't know. This one maybe. So we feel like, there is no consensus. It's not like everybody says, well, this is the seal we need to have, right? But according to research, there is one seal, or two seals to be precise, that perform whatever much better than the others. This is unbelievable, right? Has nothing to do with web design at all, right? But people tend to trust Norton. They tend to trust McAfee, right? And the reason for that is because they're using not antivirus, some kind of antivirus on the desktop, on Mac or Windows or whatever. So they tend to trust those brands. So if you just put a logo of this one and this one in your checkout, you're going to see an increase in conversion rates. This is really like a big deal because users have less confidence if credit card form field doesn't feel right, doesn't feel more secure than the rest. So this doesn't feel as secure as this. Obviously, you need a lock and things. And to be honest, right? You do need to actually sign up with those companies like GeoTrust and so on and so forth in order to put a badge. Or people can, say that you just put a badge, but who will notice anyway? Nobody cares. So you can just put those 3 badges, and you'll be better off, like that, right? So sensitive data requires. Please don't quote me on this. Sensitive data requires visual clues. It's really important to add something noticeable. So this feels like heavier because it has a gray background, right? So, but this is how we people think. Also important thing is if you actually place an order or actually are about to place an order, please make it sure to the users that they're about to pay. I was exploring lots of Japanese websites because I always go to Japanese websites for one reason. Now, when we think about going from mobile to desktop, from desktop to mobile, optimizing our desktop experience for mobile, they always go the other way around because everything is mobile first in Japan and China anyway. Like everything. They don't even have desktop sites sometimes because they have mobile sites, right? So you end up with an interesting layout, right? But the point is you always can detect really, really interesting solutions, really interesting patterns. Because many of the things that we are about to solve or we're trying to solve have already been solved in Japan or in China. So it's really, really interesting. So because I wasn't sure, I was using Google Translate, I accidentally bought a bicycle which was supposed to be delivered from Japan to Lithuania, where I was at the time because it detected my DOIP. And this guy because I actually, I use autocomplete all the time. And this guy who was selling these bicycles in Japan, he was really interested in shipping it to me. Like, really interested in it. It was a Japanese bike, I don't know. So he was like, I really canceled right away, of course. He was like, we can give you a 10% discount. Everything. I was probably the only customer who bought this on there. And I'm not sure how much it was, it's in yen, so I have no idea how much I paid. Oh, was supposed to pay. But he was really into it. So the main thing we can learn from this, don't click buttons you don't know, right? This is kind of important. But even then, if you do know what buttons say, well, sometimes you don't know. So this is probably, I'm going to pay next. I'm about to pay, right? Submit my order, maybe, not sure. Continue as guest. That's interesting. Okay. Back and continue, right? So if you have a button saying continue, it doesn't mean you know that you're going to pay. So it's really difficult. So just eliminate uncertainty by explaining when the customer is just about to make the transaction. Just say, well, in Germany it's a law now, so you have to put, you are now paying for whatever. I'm not sure how it's in Switzerland. What is like in Switzerland? But the most annoying thing you can do to users, what you should always avoid, is having links like this. So have a promo code? You don't have a promo code. Well, maybe find one. This is really bad because people really distrust links in any interface in the checkout. It's really, really bad because they're really worrying. They're worrying, they just typed in some data. If they follow a link, will this data be lost? Or, it's the same like edit link. Everybody likes an edit link because it kind of gives some sense of feeling, okay, I'm in a safe place. I can edit stuff, I can edit my data. But if it's just a link leading somewhere, it might be refreshing in the same page or anywhere else, they just don't know. So links are always associated with danger. Please be worried about that. Because, this is, I don't know, what's going to happen next, right? Especially page reload scare. This is actually a term in research. It's really interesting. Page reload refresh scare. It could be a movie or something. And the dreadful dialogue, right? So we should avoid this, right? So complicated checkout process, I mean, we can talk about it for ages, but it's really like basic usability stuff. We know this stuff. It's not a big deal. And of course, the better usability, the better conversion as well. Now, people don't really mind many steps, surprisingly. So nobody expects a checkout to be just one step, 2 steps, 3 steps. I mean, people start getting really annoyed if it's more than 7 steps, right? But it's really not a big deal. Like, we're talking about 1 form checkouts, 3 pages checkouts. It really doesn't matter as long as everything is clear. But you should not have more than 8 steps in your checkout. It's just not good for anybody, I think, right? So this is just some general stuff. There is something else I want to show you as well. Just a few ideas to keep in mind. And you'll get the slides anyway, so it's not a big deal. It's very interesting when you're buying things online, on mobile, on your device. Many times we just optimize the layout to move from desktop to mobile, right? But we forget about things. Like usually order details are in the sidebar, right? So they just jump under the checkout, under the button, right? Because we just turn it all in one column. But it's really important to keep these order details at the top so people can verify before they actually submit this button, like paying for a specific item. Now, this is really, really important. Another thing, this is also what Shopify does now, by the way. I'm saying that because many customers I'm working with are working with Shopify. So this is really important to keep, right? Because it gives you some sense of, you know exactly what's going on. Also, there is this one-click, one-tap rule, especially if you have lots of items that are really affordable or really cheap, so people are really inclined to buy a lot. You just need to have something like a plus or add to cart item or icon right on the product, right? Don't force the users to actually go into the product, add to cart, and then move back. This is also just annoying, especially for low price items. Also for giving input again, trust users to actually be correct about their input. They might be incorrect, but that's okay. That's okay because you will be able to, to get the email, and you will be able to ask them later if you need to. The video is a bit too long. This is also a very nice example where of another checkout. We don't have time for this. That is just right, where everything is in the right place. And you can also do some experiments. So, for example, this is very interesting. They have on cottonbird.com. They have an off-canvas checkout experience. So whenever you add an item to the cart, you always have this experience of things sliding from the right to the left, right? Very much like we do with the hamburger, with the off-canvas navigation, right? So as you move through the checkout, it's always sliding from the right to the left. And it's kind of great because on desktop you see everything if you have a large screen. On tablet you still see a few columns. And on mobile you still see one column. And you can still swipe to the left and to the right in order to fill it in. That's not bad. Also, you can very often you can pre-fill, use very smart defaults to pre-fill things with zip code. So instead of asking for address, you can just start asking for a zip code, have an autocomplete, allowing people to actually select what their street is. I mean, sometimes it's really predictable. Sometimes you can't use a zip code. For example, in Russia, there is no consistent zip code, ever, dot, full stop, right? So you can't use it in Russia. But I'm pretty sure you can use it in Switzerland. So this should be fine. This is also another example where you can do the same thing, right? So you just ask for postcode first, and then you actually can collect the street and so on and so forth. Now, this is also very interesting. I will have to overrun for 5 minutes, Steven. This is unbelievable. This happens everywhere as well. According to research, what people like most is free stuff. No wonder, right? But if you add things like free gift, whatever it is, even if it's a piece of paper or whatever, you should definitely allow people to remove it, right? But they will abandon much less than if it wasn't there, right? Which is why even if it's something, I mean, it's always a good idea to add something to the cart for like something nice as a gift. Although if it's suddenly $5 or so, £5, it's not a good idea. But a free thing, it's always a nice thing to have. And it's very interesting, like, because Booking.com does it, and people love it, right? Because they buy breakfast anyway, right? They buy breakfast in their rate anyway. But tapping on this checkbox gives them a sense of, yes, this is my experience, right? And this is great. This is really interesting, right? Also, inline validation, of course, is important, but you can just make it really nice. So this is nothing fancy, but also the question is, when do you validate? Do you validate during the input, or after the person moved to the next input field, or before, right? It's a good idea to, when it comes to passwords, for example, you don't want to annoy people all the time, mismatch, 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 right? So you can actually verify the password afterwards, and actually also have this icon allowing them to see the password they're typing in, right? But you have to be really careful with inline validation as well. And also things like country selector, right? This is better than scrolling through 500 or 300 countries or so. I was kind of hoping that Scotland would make it, because then we would add a new country to the country selector, but they didn't, right? But you just can ask users to, type in a few characters. If it's Netherlands, type in NL or Netherlands or Holland or whatever, right? And then it will be recognized. That's better. Now, one last thing I have to show, because it's really, really important, is another research I found as well. So here's another one where they actually also looked in different reasons for shopping cart abandonment. And most of the things we already covered. Presented unexpected costs, lots of this stuff. This is usability issues, process taking too long, concerns about payment security, website timeout, this happens sometimes as well, price presented in a foreign currency, my payment was declined, regular things. So if we avoid it and look into what's left, you'll find that it's interesting. So there are things like I was just browsing, and that's very interesting because many people, and I'm sure that most of you, even if you don't commit to it, you're regular abandoners. You come to in an online shop, you add item to the cart, you go almost to the end just to figure out the actual final price and to leave, right? And then you come back again maybe and you do the same thing and you're thinking and wondering, should I buy or not? And to leave, right? And then you come the third time because you're getting a wonderful transactional email saying, hey, you lost something in your shopping cart. Why don't you join us and get a 10% discount or so? And then you buy, right? So this is very normal. So it's very much like actually going to the shopping mall, trying things on, leaving, coming back, trying things on, leaving back. So it's really regular. And most people just do this, right? But you always need to be convincing about delivery options as well, because it's still kind of a big chunk. Now, this is just human factor, if you like. People are crazy, so we have to deal with it somehow. But casual shoppers need convincing arguments. And you can have different arguments. So like free shipping, good reviews, good security seals, expiring discounts because people like a sense of urgency, obviously. Best price guarantee, simple returns and stuff like that. If you cover this all in your checkout, there will be no reason for people to leave, actually. Especially if you add a sense of urgency, like buy now and you'll get $5 discount or whatever. This kind of thing. But the magical bullet is free shipping. We are really crazy people. Because free shipping is very often expected. For 20% of customers, it's a top reason to shop with a particular retailer, just because they always get a free shipping. You always have to consider your thresholds. If you know that your average customer spends on average around $30, try to say that you're going to give them free shipping starting from $39, because people will buy more. In fact, 39% of customers often purchase enough items to get free shipping when available. This is also quite ridiculous, actually. So if you buy an item and you know that shipping costs maybe $5, instead of paying $35, you're ready to pay $70 to get free shipping, right? So free shipping is the thing. You always have to provide free shipping, even if it means including costs in your price or whatever. It's really, really important. So do provide some extra offers as well, potentially. You can always provide free shipping, like LL Bean, Sears, Nordstorm. Free shipping to members only, like Prime does. Free shipping with minimum order. Again, try to level up your threshold a little bit. Special free shipping days. This is where people buy a lot of stuff. And free shipping for newsletter subscription, because people really like free shipping. This is really important. And this is, for example, how it could work, right? So you have a few items, add $5 for free shipping. This is probably the best shopping experience ever at all. This is very friendly, I would say. Right, just a second. Just a second. It's kind of a really nice experience. So your cart is empty, spend $40 to get free shipping. Add $10 to get free shipping. Okay? $60 with free shipping. More items, more items, more items. Now with free shipping, right? That's kind of nice. Actually, I like this design a lot. I never bought it, so it's okay. I'm one of those serial abandoners, I guess, right? So this is like it. And if you think about this, well, we can provide some convincing arguments, and then people will be happy. But price and timing are really decisive at this point. So you have to really convince the users, the visitors, that they are buying at the right time with the right price. 2 more minutes. No, honestly, and this is it. Because this is last time, seriously. So because I'm going to. This is very interesting because when it comes to abandonment, this is a regular thing. Average time delay between first visit and purchase is 19 hours in most retail stores, but 72% of visitors will buy in the first 12 hours. So if you send a notification email or kind of a shopping cart recovery email, do that within the first 6 hours or so, and definitely within the first 24 hours, but the first 6 hours is the best window to actually make a sale. Also, it's really surprising. Different carts have different abandonment rates. So low carts have high abandonment rates and really expensive products as well. So really cheap products and really expensive products have a very high abandonment rate because it's not worth an effort, right? So if you are somewhere between this range, you should be pretty fine. So to be more specific, item between like $12.99, $239.99, well, abandonment rate pretty high, but really cheap, oh, I actually made it wrong. Really cheap and really expensive have much lower abandonment rate. Sorry, I just mixed it up. But that's okay, it's my first time. Right, so, you can read it, I guess. So if you want to re-engage, do re-engage within the first 6 or 12 hours. Right, so just to sum up, so obviously better forms do lead to better conversion. Not necessarily you can have evil design and then it will still convert. But if you really want to establish return customers, and return customers are the most important customers, you do need to make sure that your forms are well designed. Avoid hidden costs, both in terms of price and time. Guest checkout is really important. Email verification is really not important. Shipping address should always be billing address. Always provide free shipping, even if add some costs to cover it. Re-engage abandoners in the first 6 to 12 hours. Also bring important actions into the focus, as we saw in this example, where you always have the add to cart and the checkout button and the cart button always available. And you can also, and I missed it, expand the design to fill the screen, because you can also use the screen, large screen, in order to always include something like a review order column, right? Because we still have, like on large screens, we do have space for it, right? Steven looks at me really annoyingly. Things like this, right? So you can always include something like a cart or really important items, being available. It doesn't have to be really present, like in a really heavily visually presented, but if it's available, it's a good thing, right? So we can also use large screens to make the best out of e-commerce experience. And with that in mind, I'm sure you'll be really well prepared to design really wonderful and shiny and beautiful, and maybe even responsive e-commerce experiences. So I will buy in your shop as well. With that in mind, thank you. Do we have time for questions?
We have time for one. Could you just repeat your entire presentation at like half the speed? With that?
I had lots of slides to go through, so I could. Do you want me to do it again?
No. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just seen every single shopping cart on the entire internet. We have time for like one question, if anyone has one. No? Everyone's ready to eat. All right, so why were you teaching them the dark patterns?
It's not.
And why don't you have the Norton antivirus on the new Smashing book?
Well, because it's just fake. I mean, it's not. It's not. It doesn't bring anything. In our case,
it wasn't a serious question.
Okay. In our case, we always have people who are smart anyway, and they're really not dark patterns. I mean, I would really stay away from dark patterns. but they're just smart things that you can do in order to pop up a conversion a little bit. And if you add transparency to your checkout, that's all good for everybody.
All right, no questions? Then we're going to have lunch and be back at 1 o'clock. And
With me?
thanks to Vitaly.
Thank you.